The world keeps repeating the same lie. The more you own, the stronger you are. A bigger house means more power. A faster car means more respect. Fame means you matter. But what if that idea is backwards? What if real strength starts when you stop needing so much? Hundreds of years ago, there was a man who proved this. He owned nothing. He slept in a barrel, no money, no status, no protection, and yet no one could touch him. One day, the most powerful ruler on earth stood in front of him and said, "Ask me for anything you want." The man looked up and replied, "Step aside. You're blocking my sunlight." That man was Diogenes. He had no house, no title, no army, but he had something most people never reach: freedom. Here's the paradox most people miss. The less you need, the harder it is to control you. If you can't be bought, you can't be owned. If you can't be threatened, you can't be forced. In the next 10 minutes, I'll show you why living simply is not weakness. It's one of the strongest strategies a person can use. And no, this does not mean sleeping in a barrel. Let's be clear from the start. This is not about rejecting money. This is not about hating success. This is not about glorifying poverty. This is about control and who really has it. Living simply is not self-denial. It's not weakness. It's a deliberate choice. When your needs shrink, your options grow. When you rely less on what others can give or take away, you gain leverage over your own life. That's why Diogenes is not just philosophy, he's strategy. In this video, we'll look at who he really was, how modern life traps people through endless wants, what his story teaches, and how you can apply it without killing your ambition. But before we talk about why simplicity creates power, we need to understand the man behind the idea. Diogenes of Sinope was not a writer. He didn't build a school. He didn't leave behind a single book. And that's exactly why his message survived. He didn't just talk about philosophy. He lived it. And for more than 2,000 years, his life has stood as a symbol of absolute freedom. Diogenes lived in Athens at a time when everything was measured by status, how much you owned, who you knew, where you stood in society. People built their identity around wealth and reputation, around approval, around being seen. Diogenes walked straight into that world and quietly dismantled it. Not with speeches, not with violence, but with the way he lived. He belonged to a movement called cynicism, not the modern meaning, not bitterness or sarcasm, the original idea. Cynicism was simple. Reject what you don't need. Because real strength doesn't come from adding more. It comes from depending on less. The first pillar of his philosophy was autarkeia, self-sufficiency. The idea is clear. The less you depend on others, the less power they have over you. If you can live with little, no one can take away what matters. Because you already don't need it from them, this is the foundation of real power. The second pillar was shamelessness. Diogenes refused to let social expectations shape his life. He stepped outside the invisible prison built by fear of judgment. When a man stops worrying about how he looks, how he is judged, how he is ranked, he becomes difficult to control. Shame is one of the strongest tools society uses. Diogenes simply put it down. The third pillar was parrhesia, fearless speech. Diogenes didn't hide his words. He didn't soften the truth to stay safe. He spoke openly, even to kings, because he didn't need their approval. And when you don't need approval, you don't need permission. That kind of freedom is rare. Most people only experience it in their thoughts. He lived it. The fourth pillar was living according to nature, returning to what is real, what is simple, what is essential: food, shelter, sunlight, air. Everything beyond that was optional, and everything optional came with a cost. Every extra desire became a chain you chose to wear. Diogenes once said, "He has the most who needs the least." This wasn't poetry, it was a strategy, a shield against control, a defense against fear. A man who can live with little cannot be bought. He cannot be threatened. He cannot be ruled. That was his strength. And that is why his name still echoes through history, because he showed the world something dangerous, that needing nothing is the most powerful position a man can stand in. If Diogenes were alive today, he wouldn't be shocked by modern society. He would probably smirk and say, "Same game, better marketing." Because at its core, nothing has changed. The world still uses the same method to keep people obedient. First, it gives you more. Then, it traps you with what you own. We are taught a simple belief. More means you're winning. A bigger house means you made it. A faster car means you matter. A higher title means you're important. A promotion, a new phone, a luxury trip. More followers, more everything. But what most people never stop to notice is this. With every new thing you add, you also add a chain. The moment you own something, it begins to own you. A bigger house brings bigger bills, more repairs, more pressure to keep the job that pays for it. A luxury car brings insurance, maintenance, fuel, and a quiet fear of losing it. And that fear changes how you live. The moment you get what you thought you wanted, you become afraid of losing it. That's where control begins. And it's not just about physical things, it's also reputation, status, social approval. Slowly, you start shaping your life around other people's eyes. You dress a certain way, you speak a certain way, you act a certain way, not because it's who you are, but because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. That fear keeps most people on a leash without them even realizing it. Modern culture is built on manufactured wants. From the moment you wake up, you're told you're not enough. Your phone never stops. Buy this, follow that, become this version of yourself. But you're not just buying a product, you're buying a piece of your own cage. And then comes debt, the most invisible chain of all. You borrow for the house, you borrow for the car, you borrow for the lifestyle, and now the system owns your time. You work not because you choose to, but because you have to. And the more you owe, the smaller your freedom becomes. Debt is the perfect tool of control because it doesn't look like control. It looks like opportunity. It promises comfort, progress, a better life. But in exchange, it quietly takes your future. And then there is the attention economy. Every beep, every ping, every notification, all of it is designed to pull your focus apart. When your attention is scattered in 1,000 directions, you never go deep enough to build real power. You stay busy, you stay reactive, you stay distracted. And a distracted person is easy to manage. This is the part most people miss. More is not always stronger. Often more is heavier. More slows you down. More makes you fragile. More ties your strength to things outside yourself. And when your power comes from things you can lose, it isn't real power. Diogenes understood this long before modern systems existed. He saw how desire could be turned into chains. That's why he stripped his life down to what he actually needed, because when a man owns nothing, there is nothing to take from him. And when a man fears nothing, fear stops working as a weapon. This is not about becoming a monk. It's not about hiding in a cave. It's about seeing the game clearly. The system doesn't need to lock you in a cage. It just needs to convince you to build one yourself out of everything you think you need. That's why simplicity is not a romantic idea. It's a weapon, and Diogenes knew how to use it. He also understood something else. Philosophy doesn't always need words. Sometimes one action speaks louder than 1,000 arguments. Diogenes didn't try to convince society, he exposed it. He embarrassed it, by living in a way that revealed its weakness. One of the most famous stories begins with something small, a bowl. Diogenes carried a simple wooden bowl to drink water. One day, walking through the city, he saw a young boy kneel at a public fountain. The boy cupped his hands and drank. He didn't need anything else. Diogenes stopped, watched him for a moment. Then, without a word, he threw his bowl away. That single act was a declaration. Even the simplest object can become an unnecessary chain. If a child could live with less, so could he. Diogenes didn't give lectures about minimalism. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He showed it. Another moment made this even clearer. One day, Diogenes crossed paths with Alexander the Great. Alexander was the most powerful man in the world, an emperor, a conqueror, and he stood in front of a philosopher who owned nothing. Alexander asked him, "Is there anything I can give you?" Diogenes was lying on the ground, resting in the sun. He looked up and said, "Yes. Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." This wasn't a joke. And it wasn't just a clever line. It was a statement of power. The emperor had everything. The philosopher needed nothing. And in that moment, the man without a crown stood higher than the man who ruled the world. Alexander is said to have replied, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Because even a king understands one truth. A man who cannot be bought is dangerous. But Diogenes didn't stop there. One day he walked through the crowded streets of Athens in broad daylight, holding a lit lantern. People stared, they laughed. They asked what he was doing. He answered, "I'm looking for an honest man." It was his way of exposing the lie around him. A city full of people chasing wealth and status, claiming virtue, living false lives. His behavior shocked everyone. He ate in the street when others called it shameful. He slept wherever he chose. He ignored rituals, titles, and social rules. But this wasn't rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It was exposure. He showed how fragile those rules were, how arbitrary, how dependent they were on fear and approval. Every gesture was deliberate. Every action was a message. A man who does not fear judgment has nothing to lose, and a man with nothing to lose cannot be controlled. That was Diogenes' true genius. While others fought for power, he simply walked away from the need for it. What frightened society most was not his poverty, it was his invincibility. The truth is simple. When your life is built on what you own, your fears are built on it too. And once fear enters the picture, someone will eventually use it against you. On the individual level, this happens quietly. You work hard to build a life that looks successful. You buy things to feel safe. But with every purchase, with every new responsibility, you give away a small piece of your freedom. The house you once dreamed of becomes a weight you carry. The car becomes a monthly reminder of the job you can't afford to leave. The image you built turns into a mask you're forced to wear. And the moment any of it is threatened, your sense of self begins to shake. Because it was never built on who you are, it was built on what you own. That's why so many people collapse when they lose a job, a house, or a title. They didn't just lose an object, they lost the foundation of their identity. But this doesn't stop with the individual. At the collective level, a society driven by endless needs is easy to control. When people fear losing what they have, they obey. When debts and obligations grow, they stay silent. When they're distracted by constant wanting, they stop questioning power. The system doesn't need force. It only needs people busy protecting their own cages. That is why Diogenes terrified those in power. He was living proof that a man with nothing to lose cannot be controlled. No law, no ruler, no threat. He had already stepped outside the game everyone else was trapped in. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The more your life is built around things, the more fragile you become. The less you need, the harder you are to break. Understanding Diogenes is one thing. Becoming untouchable in your own life is another. You don't need to throw everything away. You don't need to sleep in a barrel. Reclaiming your power doesn't require extremes. It requires a strategy, a deliberate way to simplify your life without killing your ambition. Because simplicity is not the finish line. It's the foundation, a stable base from which real strength can grow. This strategy has 4 pillars: reduce, protect, grow, multiply. The first pillar is reduce. Before you build anything meaningful, you have to remove the noise. You cannot take control of your life while your energy is scattered across 100 useless directions. So you begin with something simple, a 14-day audit. For 2 weeks, write down everything you spend your time and money on: subscriptions, apps, social events, daily routines, small purchases that feel harmless. Then ask one uncomfortable question for every single item. Do I actually need this? Or have I just gotten used to it? The goal is not to live with nothing. The goal is to cut the fat, to remove what no longer serves you, because every unnecessary obligation is a leash, and every leash has a hand holding it. Next, apply a 7-day attention detox. For 1 week, turn off notifications for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night. No news, no messages, no scrolling. These blocks of silence are not empty time. They are where power is rebuilt. Because attention is leverage. If you cannot control your attention, you cannot control your direction. Once a month, commit to a no-spend weekend. No shopping, no impulse purchases, no numbing your mind with easy dopamine. This isn't about saving a few dollars. It's about retraining your brain to feel the difference between want and need. It's about proving to yourself that contentment doesn't require constant consumption. And every time you do that, the world loses one more handle on you. The second pillar is protect. Because if you don't protect what matters, you will always be reacting instead of leading. Start by building what I call a financial firewall. Create a safety net of 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses. Not luxury, not comfort, stability. Then attack high-interest debt as fast as you can. Because debt is a modern chain. And no one is free with a chain around their neck. You can't think clearly. You can't choose freely. You can't walk away when you need to. Freedom without protection is just a story you tell yourself. The less your survival depends on someone else's paycheck, the more dangerous you become to anyone trying to control you. That's why protection doesn't stop with money. You also have to protect your time and your relationships. Not everyone deserves your energy. Here's a simple rule, the 3 deep rule. Focus on a small number of relationships that truly matter. People who support your growth. Not people who drain you. Not people who pull you back into noise. Learn to politely decline most invitations that don't align with your direction. This isn't arrogance, it's discipline. A man who gives his time to everyone ends up owning nothing of himself. The third pillar is grow. Once you've reduced the noise and protected your energy, you finally have space. And space is where growth happens. Spend 30 to 90 minutes each day in solitude. No phone, no background noise, no distraction. Just you, your thoughts, and your direction. This is how you find your telos. The purpose that actually matters. Because without a clear telos, every form of leverage becomes a trap. You end up chasing goals that belong to other people. You build power for a life you don't even want. Once your telos is clear, invest your time into skill stacking. Choose one skill that aligns with your direction. Commit to it for 90 days. No endless multitasking. No jumping between shiny ideas. Depth creates strength. Breadth without depth creates noise. The fourth pillar is multiply. After you've simplified your life, protected your time, and grown your skills, now you can use leverage deliberately. This is where simplicity meets ambition. Because power without clarity turns into chaos. But power built on simplicity turns into precision. Choose your levers carefully. It might be technology, it might be an audience, it might be capital, or a small trusted network. Whatever you choose, make sure it amplifies what you already believe in, not what the world pressures you to chase. Most people use leverage the wrong way. They use it to fill a void, to buy status, to hide insecurity, to chase illusions. But when you start from simplicity, leverage becomes a weapon, not a crutch. And here's what most people never realize. The simpler your foundation, the more risk you can afford to take. When you don't fear losing what you don't actually need, you move faster. You act bolder. You build stronger. That's why some of the most dangerous people in history were not the most powerful on paper. They were the least dependent. They could walk away. And the man who can walk away holds the real power. The final piece of this strategy is boundaries. Powerful people know when to say no. They don't explain. They don't apologize. They set limits and let the world adjust. Create public rituals of boundary setting. For example, I don't take calls after 8 p.m. I don't work weekends. I don't answer messages immediately. When you say no to the world, you train the world to respect your time. That is real strength. And unlike possessions, no one can take it from you. This strategy is not theory. It works because it's built on the same timeless principle that made Diogenes untouchable. When your needs are few, your power is real. When your power is real, leverage works for you, not against you. And when leverage works for you, control disappears. By now, some resistance is rising. I can hear the voice in your head. This sounds good in theory, but not everyone can afford to live simply. If I slow down, I'll fall behind. I need to network. I need to build. I need to move fast. These are fair questions. They come from real pressure. So let's answer them honestly. The first argument goes like this. Living simply is just another word for being poor. No, poverty is being forced to live with less. Simplicity is choosing to live with less. One is weakness, the other is power. You can live simply and still build wealth. In fact, many of the most successful entrepreneurs and investors did exactly that. They kept their burn rate low. They built a long runway, and in doing so, they bought themselves freedom. Simplicity is not the enemy of ambition. It's what makes ambition sustainable. The second argument is this. But I need connections. I need people. How can I build without constant socializing? Yes, relationships matter. But here's the truth. Quality beats quantity. 3 real relationships built on trust will do more for your future than 1,000 shallow contacts. When you stop chasing everyone's approval, you stop wasting your life on empty conversations. And when your circle becomes smaller but stronger, your influence grows, not shrinks. Simplicity does not mean isolation. It means strategic connection. The third argument goes like this. Not everyone has the privilege to choose this. That's true. Some people carry heavier weights, but simplicity is not all or nothing. It's a spectrum. Even a small step changes the direction. Turning off notifications for 2 hours, cutting one unnecessary expense, each step gives you a little more control, and control compounds. A 1-degree shift can change your entire trajectory over time. The fourth argument is fear. If I remove too much, won't I lose motivation? In most cases, the opposite happens. When distractions disappear, what remains is the raw signal of what truly drives you. Your telos becomes louder. The energy you once spent chasing noise gets redirected into what actually matters. Simplicity is not retreat. It is not surrender. It is clarity. And clarity is what most people never reach. Diogenes once said, "He has the most who needs the least." Now you understand why those words were not philosophy. They were a declaration of war, a war against every chain the world tries to place around you. Living simply is not about giving up. It is about taking back what was always yours: your time, your attention, your choices, your power. When you no longer need their approval, their money, or their system, you become untouchable. And when you are untouchable, you can finally choose where to build, what to build, and why to build it. This is the strength Diogenes embodied, the strength of a man who stood before a king and needed nothing. Now it's your turn to test it. Here is the 7-day minimal challenge. For 7 days, turn off notifications for 2 hours every morning and 2 hours every night. Have one no-spend weekend. Say no to 70% of invitations and obligations that don't serve your direction. Sit alone with your thoughts for 30 minutes each day. 7 days. No excuses. Do this and you will feel the difference. Not in how much you own, but in how little owns you. If you're ready to take back your leverage, comment "I'll try" below. And if you want me to show you how to turn simplicity into real, unstoppable power, comment "leverage." Diogenes didn't wait for permission, neither should you. The strongest man is not the one who owns the most. It's the one who needs the least.